Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started, as we do each and every week, going into our first pick. I want to introduce my co-host, Ruben Bresler.
Hello.
Aaron Campbell.
Hey.
All right. And as we do, we start with the first pick. Our first pick for this week, the big thing that happened in Magic not only was the Pro Tour, but the OP changes announced at Pro Tour Origin, of which there were many, of which there were some absolutely incredible ones. We can get this out of the way that SCG and StarCityGames.com and the Open Series / Invitational / Players Championship circuit is going to have Pro Tour invites in 2016, not in 2015, not this year. You only get, $10,000 on your token or $20,000 and the sickest bragging rights need to come back and so on and so forth. No. But 2016, you also get a Pro Tour invite. Now that could change. Everything's kind of in flux, but this is sort of what we know so far. And this is for any other series. So if there's any other series around the world that has something like, I think they said like 20 qualifying events.
20 qualifying events or more.
Sure.
Which qualifies things like the Star City Games Invitationals, as well as TCG Player Invitationals, I think are the two big ones in the United States.
Right.
And then there's a couple of tournament series overseas, specifically Japan, I think, that have a couple. But this is definitely mostly a Star City Games thing, I would think.
Well, sure, but obviously beyond that, I'm thrilled. I really appreciate it. Wizards, you fulfilled all the hopes and dreams and things, and I'm just excited that the players now have the different paths, and you don't have to just say, well, because I'm focusing on the Open Series and I'm focusing on the leaderboard and getting to the Players Championship and so on and so forth. There's just no way I can get to the Pro Tour, or I have to give this up so I can go play in this Grand Prix because the Invitational doesn't pay out an invite, whereas now it does. Aaron, how do you feel about that?
I'm excited about it. I have friends who prefer the SCG circuit, like Jeff Hoagland, Feline Longmore, and they are people who I have always said are good enough to be on the GP circuit. And I've often asked them, hey, how come you guys aren't going to GPs? And they just enjoy, the Star City events, not to blow smoke up your skirt, Evan, but just what it is, and they enjoy that, and so they can still play in a circuit that they love to play in and still possibly reap the benefits of going to a GP, and I think that's fantastic, especially because location plays a factor. Like there are some, it's easier for some people to get to the Opens than it is to get to GPs, and I'm all for it.
Sure. So
I think that this only makes sense, especially
Yeah.
if even Wizards, even though Wizards sort of kind of considers the Open Series a competitor. In the end, it's helping sell Magic cards. In the end, it's helping people get into Magic. So it only makes sense. And every other game has this. Hearthstone, for example, has qualifying events for BlizzCon that aren't run by Blizzard. They're run by third-party companies like Tempo Storm and stuff like that. Every other game has this, and Magic doing it. It was bound to happen, and I'm glad that it's happening this soon.
Sure. And so while we're talking about that, just real quickly, we don't have this in Splash Damage, but I just kind of thought about this. They have been broadcasting the Dota 2 Invitational on ESPN, not one of the numbers, like the real one, the official one. That is huge to me. That is absolutely amazing.
Heroes of the Storm was on ESPN2 with Sean Plott as one of the commentators.
Nice.
A couple other folks that people recognize from Heroes of the Storm. That game was still in beta, technically. It was in open beta when it was being broadcast on ESPN. I'm not surprised. There's a ton of money in esports.
Yeah.
And a ton of money in card games, too.
Blizzard actually just released the results of their earning call the other day, and it was to the point where the money that they're making, they're still making money from World of Warcraft, but the majority of their profits is coming from the Hearthstones, the Heroes of the Storm, and that was kind of nice to see. And again, it was a little, you couldn't help but feel there was just a little jab where you're seeing all this prosperity from the Blizzard side of things, and then you're like, E2 Moto, and you're like...
Yeah. Blizzard is super good at everything except organized play. If they had Wizards' organized play department and could figure stuff out like Wizards just figured out, they would take over the world.
Yeah.
I can't figure out how the Hearthstone top level play works.
It's impossible.
I literally cannot figure it out.
I've talked with a couple of the big Hearthstone pros. Orange, for example, John Westberg, who's a Magic player, well-known European Magic player. I asked him when I was in Dallas, because a lot of the guys from Archon live in Dallas. I was like, how do you even get into it? And he was like, I just kind of fell into it because I had some friends that knew when tournaments were happening. He didn't look them up. His friends told him when they were happening.
So the answer is sorcery.
Yeah, basically black magic happens, and then you're in a Hearthstone tournament.
For like $1 bajillion.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like how the you know those fans that don't have blades run on black magic. It's the
Right.
same magic,
Yeah, you're like that's
as opposed
there's-
to magic, where the OP is actually good.
Exactly. So speaking of OP, as we get back around here, the GP payout was updated, and I thought this was really sweet. Up to 2,999 players. Can you imagine if there was a GP with 2,999 players? You get $50,000. I know, right? It's just like, could just one more person, please? It pays up to $50,000, and 3,000 or more players pays up to $75,000. And that's incredible. They also, because they kept going, everyone who gets a Pro Tour invite at a Grand Prix, this includes like the huge events like Modern Masters events and the the GP Richmonds of the world, where you go like X2 or X whatever it takes to get a PT invite, are going to give you the travel award. That's amazing. All X3s are going to make GP Day 2 now. That's awesome. So you can battle it out if you're looking for pro points and I think this is something that Eric Froelich, I believe he mentioned it on Facebook, where he was talking about he didn't realize, like how important it was to stay in a tournament, to keep playing and to just keep grinding that out, and that he's gotten so much further, and he got so much further in his Player of the Year bid, essentially, that he got overtaken by Sigrist by just staying in events, by saying, you know what, I'm out of the top 8, but I'm here to play, I'm here to battle, and I want to do the best I can, and even if you don't get the top 8, you can still have a nice record, you can still have a nice finish. Ruben, how do you feel about that?
I'll address the 3 different things specifically.
Go for it.
Less than 3,000 players, 50K. Over 3,000 players, 75K.
Mm-hmm.
There is going to be a feel bad because there's 50 GPs a year. You're going to have a GP that has 2,970 players, and you're just going to be like, oh, rats, we didn't quite get there. Whoever wins is going to be upset about that. But this is a change that needed to happen. The fact that there's only 2 tiers to it, like this is the line, is a little weird. I'd like it if there were 3. Between 2,500 to 3,500, I would like that slightly more. But whatever, it is what it is. Travel awards for everyone who gets an invite. That's the best change. That's the best news I've heard all year.
That is
fantastic.
fantastic.
The smartest thing I've heard. It's a little weird that they announced it right when they were like, and by the way, we're putting a Pro Tour in Sydney, Australia.
Wow, that's just like, holy cow. I don't think, and it's one of those things we were talking about a little bit before the show, like, if you don't really understand it, Wizards is going to be paying a Mount Everest of dollar bills to get all of these players who are qualified down to Australia. Aaron, how do you feel about the GP changes? One of the last that I didn't really touch on was that they said they were going to restructure the payouts so they're very top heavy.
I like this for the most part, but I admit that I can't help but wonder where the money's going to come from. Like there was a lot of kerfuffle about the increased cost of GPs that we've experienced over the past, year or so. And, there were some GPs where, and I think the majority of GPs now, you don't get a play mat just for signing up. You either have to play in a designated side event or, register for a certain package to get a play mat. And people were really upset about that. And, I do wonder if there isn't a little catch where maybe we see higher costs. And I think
I can dispel a few of those things.
Okay.
Firstly, there was a time in which not every main event competitor got playmats, and that has essentially since changed. All of the organizers are, regardless of the level of the package or whatever that you have. Now there is a side event playmat that you could be talking about. For example, the Vendilion Click mat at Modern Masters Las Vegas. You can only get by playing in a side event or playing in certain side events or winning one or something. But the other half is all of the prize money from Grand Prix comes from Wizards of the Coast. It is their marketing budget, basically.
Okay.
And so the organizer does not have to pay out the prizes, but they have to, pay for everything else, essentially.
Okay. One change
so that's
that
the
did
thing.
bother me, it wasn't covered here, but I do want to bring it up, is so there was a TO that I really, really like that is popular in the Midwest, specifically called Legion Games, and it was revealed that Legion will not be in charge of any of the GPs that they announced for 2016. And I personally was very sad about that because I've always enjoyed a Legion run event. I like Steve Port a lot, and I was under the impression, and they certainly gave the impression that they weren't aware of it being anything that they did. It just happened to work work out that way, I guess. And that was one change I was a little disappointed with, is especially because of, if they've been passed over for a better TO, that's a good thing, but I suspect they may not be, and that makes me feel a little bad. So I wish that, you know, all the TOs were of the level that we'd like them to be. So
I can say nothing bad about Steve Port.
yeah, he's wonderful.
I can safely say that with, you know, Ruben, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, there are certainly some TOs that I like better than others, and I had no real awful experiences with any of Steve's events. I mean, I'm not going to drop names or anything, but there are some TOs that I specifically avoid their Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Because that they are not good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And every once in a while they get punished. You know, like there was a TO in Europe that I think kind of got blacklisted a couple years ago.
Even recently.
Because, was it even more recently than that?
It was a GP in Spain, I
Spain,
think.
yeah. There was a GP in Spain where they like turned people away because they didn't get a venue that was big enough, and then something else went wrong, and then Wizards was like, we're done.
Yeah, they
with
ran
you.
out of playmats, I think, or something like that. There was something, they ran out of something.
There was a lot of bad stuff that happened
yeah.
at one specific event, and that led to them getting excommunicated. But, you know, I think that you gotta... I suspect that there are ulterior motives for that specific change, and I'm none too happy with that. However, you gotta, I don't know, appease the master when you're running Magic events. You know, you walk up. If you go to the Don's wedding, you gotta kiss him on the cheek. You know what I mean? So that kind of thing exists in Magic. You know, this is all behind the scenes kind of stuff, and I'm not a TO, but you know, I'm friends with enough people in the Magic community to know that this is you know, there are reasons beyond being good at organizing a tournament for why someone is not given tournaments.
I do
and that's unfortunate.
I was just gonna say, I do, before we, you know, close up that topic, I just want to say I also like I really like the XM3 change. You know, one of the pieces of advice that I hear being thrown around a lot is, if you want to get better at the game, play people who are better than you. And you know, for somebody who, you know, maybe doesn't get that level of play, to be able to XM3, make it to day 2, and possibly play Paul Cheon or play Gabby Sparts or play somebody really good and get that experience, I think that might, you know, not only do they have a chance to maybe get some cash, even if it's not top 8, you know, they can also get some experience they wouldn't be able to get at home, and that's pretty invaluable.
Absolutely.
And just to say you made day 2 feels really good. You know, we live in a vacuum sometimes where we assume that everybody goes to these things, but to be able to go back to your town, you know, let's say you're living in Tupelo and you're like, I made day 2 at a GP. That's big, and you should absolutely be able to say that.
GP Tupelo.
Hey, I made day 2 of my first GP.
Did you?
Oh, let me get that off your shoulder there, Evan.
Did you ride a dinosaur home from the event, or did you?
Yeah, he walked both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I scooted I scooted the Flintstones over, and we piddle paddled our way back to Tennessee. It was great. It was, unfortunately it was one of the, I don't know, it was forever before I day 2 another GP, but you know, whatever. It was the beginner's luck thing, and I'm happy with that. My first GP, high five, GP Detroit. Anyway, so we're gonna move on.
So they put another GP in Detroit. Why do they keep putting GPs in Detroit? I don't get it.
Because it's a major metropolitan area. I don't know.
Yeah, but like, it's kind of gross there, and there's other cities in the Midwest that whatever. It's just
whatever. We're gathering the townsfolk.
Milwaukee's getting one next year.
Hawaii is getting a pro tour.
No, I said Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee. That I misheard you.
Milwaukee, where I live.
Didn't mean to.
Well,
I've now incurred the wrath of all of Detroit. Let's
Oh Lord. Anyway, we're moving on. We're gathering the townsfolk. Gather the Townsfolk is talking about the legendary cube. Today, they announced that Commander's a blast, and they announced Commander 2015, and they're going to come up with this legendary cube on November 18th, and it's not just a cube, because previously there was like cubes which were like depowered, and there was holiday cubes which had all the power, and now there's this legendary cube where they don't really explain if every card in the cube is legendary, but they do say that all the creatures in it are legendary. But then, not only that, they have legendary cube prize packs, which you can get cards from the cube in your collection. I guess it's from all the cube, I believe, I think. They have 6 cards in them. I guess they're really good. They will have cards from all the Commander sets, apparently. These are all multiplayer products, they say, but non-Commander players will find highly sought-after cards and prize packs that will help in Legacy and Vintage. They won't be purchasable. The prize packs won't be purchasable and won't be tradable. So the only way to get them is the new Cube Draft.
They will be tradable. Cards contained within the prize packs will be tradable.
Right,
normal.
but the prize packs themselves.
Oh, the prize packs themselves won't be tradable.
Will not be tradable. So once you open them, sure, they're just cards in your collection. But so yeah, they're gonna. So they're making new Cube stuff. They're making new Cube rewards. I came from cubing back in the day. You know, I read the Sam Gummersall article. I built my cube. I loved my cube, and I pruned it for many years, and then eventually I kind of moved away from it. But you know, I don't know if I really like the idea of we keep redefining what a cube is, that we keep saying that a cube is this or a cube is that, or a cube is a pauper cube or a cube is a common uncommon cube. And I think there's ways to really make it clear, like the ones I just mentioned, like a pauper cube, you get it. There's just common cards in there. But when you say legendary cube, does that mean you're going to have legendary lands, or is it the legendary creature thing? Or am I literally going to be opening up a pack of 15 creatures and then get past 14 creatures and then 13 creatures and so on and so forth? Because I don't know if that's really an experience I want to have, and if that is and now we have these prize packs that are of the cube, but that's not really what happens in real life. And I thought, you know, what they were trying to do was kind of mirror this experience that people have, which is you build your own format, which is what cube is. It's amazing. You can make your own format be what you want it to be, and then at the end of it, you say, that was a great experience. I had fun with my friends, and we'll do it again next time. And, you know, for Magic Online, for them to give you some prize points or whatever out of it so you can play more cube, that's fun. But I don't know, like, if we're starting to veer into this weird territory where people are supposed to know that a cube is a format, they're calling it a format, but you don't even understand what it means to be called legendary at that point. I mean, you know, what do you think, guys?
Yeah, this is super confusing. Because this is a teaser announcement, I don't think that we're supposed to know. I think that we are supposed to just be like, well, I wonder what this is. And then I can't imagine, though, that it's going to be like you open up a pack and it's like 13 creatures, a Tolarian Academy, and a Mindslaver. And you're like, well, okay. I guess I'll take Isamaru because there's no other one-drop legends except for Nor in the Wary.
Isn't Zergo Bellstriker a legend?
Yeah, Zergo Bellstriker.
There we go.
We found another one.
All right.
But like everyone's gonna be fighting over goblins because there's like Slowbad and Ib Halfheart, right? That's the deck you want, I guess. Maybe Zozu. Ishi Goblin Crackpot. I think we're stretching the boundaries of what it means to
Did
be
you just Ishi me?
Hey, they're setting the precedent.
Ben, Aki Hermit. I could go on, but I won't because this is stupid. So I think that the Legendary Cube, all the arts will probably be themed legendarily. I don't think that they're going to introduce new cards.
They just printed a 1-mana legendary creature. His name is Kithion, Hero of Akros.
I apologize. At this point, I can only apologize.
There was Risk the Redeemed from Shadowmoor. Look, I just did a search, so I can just throw it at you.
I'm very proud of you and your Google skills, but let me finish. I think that the lightning bolt that will inevitably be in this cube will be themed to be Chandra's lightning bolt.
Oh,
I
God.
think that the lead designer, the lead game design and development was Adam Prozac. There's gonna be Merfolk Looter in this set. The Merfolk Looter is gonna be themed Kiora style with Kiora art or whatever.
Oh God!
No, why not?
Why? I hope not. That's bad.
Who knows what this is? This is a box of things that we don't know what's in it.
Maybe, well, look, we're probably literally just like, you know, we're just buying into exactly what they wanted to happen, which is a bunch of Magic players who are deeply invested go, what is this? I don't know what this is. I have thoughts about Cube. I have thoughts about what a Legendary Cube is. Aaron, how do you feel about it?
You know, I've never been a big cube person. I think the only times I've ever cubed is when I visited friends in Seattle, actually, coincidentally enough, and they happen to have a cube with them, and we do it at somebody's apartment or something. So I kind of agree with you in that I've played cubes without necessarily really knowing what they are. Like I've gotten like really bare bones explanations, and I'm like, okay, sure, but I couldn't really tell you anything about like the theory behind them or anything complicated. So I can relate to what you're saying about just kind of going, what? Like I barely know what a cube is now, and now you're throwing this at me. I'm also not a big Commander player, so that really doesn't. There's just a lot of keywords here that don't really affect me. The one thing I did like about this was I did see several friends of mine who were involved in the development. Like I saw my friend Ali Medwin, who was an editor on the design team, and Ryan Spain, who I love, and Robert's sister Jackie Lee, bow down.
There we go.
Baddest bee, and just lots
The
of good
Brush
people.
Strider will be in this cube too.
There we go.
So just people who I normally like.
Striding the brushes.
Trust, and if they've put themselves into this product, then maybe I'll give it a try.
Well, I mean, certainly, I know many of those that you just mentioned, and I expect them to do a fantastic job at what they were given to them. It's just, it's one of those where it's like, well, cube, and the number one advice I have for anyone who plays a cube, always draft mono red if you've never played it.
I do.
If you've never played a cube,
I would never play it
red.
in my daily life. I would never be caught dead playing mono red. But when I play a cube, I always get mono red.
There's a funny thing that cube allows you to. The things that you do in day-to-day Magic, the decks that you normally play, are typically the decks that you don't play in cube, and you play everything else. LSV is famous for playing mono red in cube because I don't know if he did it this last Pro Tour, but previous to this last Pro Tour, he'd never played mono red at a Pro Tour. But he always plays mono red at cube. And people knew that at Worlds when he was at Worlds 2 years ago, and he had another sick mono red deck because they would just be like, well, LSV is going to play mono red. So that was kind of funny. But I definitely think that it's an exciting idea. I like the idea of specialty cubes. We tried artifact cubes. A friend of mine named Peter Johnson has the counters cube, where everything has to do with counters. And so, like, the best cards in the cube are, like...
the proliferate?
There's, like, proliferate, and there's wither, and there's persist, and there's, like, all these cool things, and, like, engineered explosives, and chalice of the void, and cool things like that. That's a cool cube. People have built tribal cubes, people have built pauper cubes, people have built,
combo cubes.
Colored cubes.
Eric Klug had really a humans versus zombies cube once. That was fun.
Mono Blue Cube I've played before is owned by John Johnson. That's a ton of fun. So, there are tons of cubes. This one in particular confuses me because the word legendary has a specific meaning. There's a lot of blue cards.
Right.
There's a lot of combo cards. There's a lot of tribal cards. There are not nearly as many legendary cards.
Right.
And so I am cautiously awaiting what this actually is. I don't know what this is.
I would be far more excited if they'd have been a tribal cube. If it's like we're picking merfolk versus zombies versus goblins versus elves, and like we're doing this, and we'll have cards that help you kind of work in between the two, and obelisk of Erd and all those other weird tribal cards and things. I don't know. Again, they're going to define it as they see fit, and I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. But I just feel it's a little weird to kind of start changing the meaning of stuff. Speaking of changing the meaning of stuff, as we go into Going Infinite, we are going to talk about the sort of the theories, the thought experiments. And one of the thought experiments was an absolutely amazing idea by the Mox Boarding House, the shop up in Seattle, to do the rematch of the century. So brutal they can't even sanction it. One night only.
Boy, this poster.
They did a poster, and I'm gonna work on getting it on the screen while you guys talk about it. But Justin this poster was Justin Treadway's, one of his masterpieces, and it's the modern format with no ban list. They had to run it unsanctioned, but it's like, you know what? You just do whatever you want. You just be you. You just take any card. We don't care if it's Bloodbraid Elf or Jace or Deathrite Shaman or Blazing Shoal or whatever. Just play it and wear it out. And Ruben, talk to me about, your thoughts on it. And Aaron, if you want to talk about some of the top decks while I get this picture on the screen.
This is such a neat idea. I wish that there was more stuff like this. I know when I was growing up in Columbus, Ohio, we would have unsanctioned vintage because not everybody can have, not everybody owns their own playset of Moxen. You know what I mean? And so you could proxy, and you had to plan a little bit ahead. You couldn't just write, a Jace on a mountain. You had to have a card that was at least a little bit cared for. Unless it was like a last second thing, they always allowed you to make your stuff at the last second. But the idea was to make it feel like a vintage tournament without being too expensive for the casual person that isn't 100% into it. And this was always a thing that Mean Deck did, the team Mean Deck that Steve Menendian and several other people from Midwest are famous for starting. I think that this is a really cool extension of that, because Modern's another of these eternal formats now, and we have this extensive banned list, and people love their cards. People love Bloodbraid Elf, people love Jace, people love Deathrite Shaman, people love Mental Misstep, man. I don't know why, but boy, they love Sensei's Divining Top. I have those stupid cards, but this allows you to play, whatever it is that you want to play. Unfortunately, this makes like burn way worse. So I don't know how much burn there would be in the metagame if you could play Blazing Shoal, but But yeah, I think that this is a really cool idea, and the thoughts that I had of what I would play if I were playing in this tournament were way different than what actually ended up doing well, right, Aaron?
Yeah, I of course was looking at Dredge. The first thing I saw when I saw that poster was Dread Return, so I was very excited about that. But then I realized that Hypergenesis was also a thing, and I played Living End for over a year. That was my first Modern deck. I have a lot of love for it, and there were 3 Hypergenesis decks. They didn't make top 8, but they were still at the event, and oh my gosh, I mean, Violent Outburst, Ardent Plea, Progenitus, into Emrakul or Terastodon, and just, the things that I'm used to, but with this eternal twist, or this extended twist. It was just like, oh my god, like if I could Violent Outburst into an Emrakul, it's just magical Christmas land for me. And I wasn't around for a lot of these cards, so when I hear things about Mental Misstep or I hear things about Skull Clamp, I think there is a part of me that wants to kind of see what the big deal was, because people can tell you all they want, but until you actually see it, then you're like, oh, like I get it now. And I also think it's an opportunity to possibly show people that maybe some of these cards aren't so scary anymore. I do think there were cards that I was expecting to see and I didn't see them at all, and if that maybe spurs the discussion about changing the ban list and things like that, I'm all for that too, because I've been a big proponent for unbanning things, not necessarily banning more, but the times have changed quite a bit, and I think that some of these cards aren't that threatening anymore.
Right. Well, there's this kind of chicken and egg problem where you say, like, okay, we're going to hold events that aren't sanctioned, that have no ban list, to see how bad it can be, and then something happens where you only see like 2 Jaces or whatever in the top 8, and everyone's like, well, like obviously Jace is okay, and then they go, well, the best in the world weren't playing in this tournament, so you don't really know if the format was bad or not.
They didn't have a week and a half to test at Efro's house with Team Channel Fireball and sit down and be like, what can we do with Ancestral Vision, right? And then just completely break the format in half, which happens before almost every Modern Pro Tour.
Yeah, well, and they also shake it up and ban a bunch of stuff so that you don't realize, like, okay, this Pro Tour is literally just going to be pod versus pod. Yeah. Shoot myself.
Yeah, exactly. But I definitely like the thought experiment, and I definitely like that it wasn't just a thought experiment for like a guy who was like, I wonder what would happen if we did this. They were actually like, no, we're scientific methoding this thing and just releasing it on the world. Everyone who's near us, do your worst. Like, try to figure out the worst you could do. I think I probably would have ended up playing Green Sun Zeniths and Skull Clamps in an Elf deck and play LSV's extended deck from Berlin, basically, with like a better win condition. But that didn't do well. There's a lot of ways to shut that down. In the top 8, you saw there was a deck that had 4 surgical extractions. In the main deck, there was a deck that was basically blue-white hate bears, basically. It was like probably meddling mage and then a bunch of flicker wisps and thalias that shut down all the crazy things that people are going to try to do. And that's more like Legacy than anything else. I'm a big Maverick fan, not just the movie, also the deck. Where back in the day, Maverick was great and I loved it, but it's not really playable anymore, unfortunately. And when you get a metagame that's more like Legacy, when you have these unfair cards like Jace, like Dread Return, then you start getting a rebound effect where people are like, hold on, we need answers to these specific strategies. So you're going to see more spell snares, for example, or you're going to see more mental missteps to be able to answer the broken strategies. And it's a whole different metagame. I'm not totally surprised that the banned cards that there weren't 15 banned cards in every deck. This isn't vintage. You know what I mean?
Sure.
it's not super surprising. It's a little surprising that there were only 2 Jaces.
Yeah,
I was just
exactly.
happy to see such a positive response. Like I said, I retweeted the poster because I'd seen somebody else talking about it, and my feed was just lighting up. It was completely like I would totally do this. And then I also cross-posted it to my local Facebook group, the City of Milwaukee, and even people there were like, "I'm in. Like, can we do this here?" And I had no idea. And I think the poster certainly helped, but it was I didn't expect that many people to be down for it. Like I was expecting the critics to really come out, and I was
Right.
surprised by the positivity from the people that I follow that were really excited about this, and they should be. Like I think this is great.
Yeah, very few things are universally accepted in the Magic community. One of them is the new mulligan rule. Another one is this tournament.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well,
And
I
that
mean,
goes to Mock Sporting House just being really innovative and an awesome store, you know?
yeah, and I think they did a great thing. I think there's like a new subreddit or something built around this, and people can really get excited about it. And I think it's really nice, just like, you know, take the chains off and just like, you know, it's just like one of those, like, you know, you own a sports car or you own this like crazy car that can go a million miles an hour, but there's no streets where you can actually just put the thing, just pedal to the floor and let's go as fast as we can. They don't let you do that anywhere unless you're at a racetrack. And this is kind of that racetrack where they say, okay, go as fast as you want, do whatever you want to, mod your car, go crazy. And I'll bring up the screen, the poster one more time, because one of the brilliant things that Treadway does is he kind of apes and kind of, you know, changes things around to match the culture of what he's kind of parodying in a perfect way. I mean, so brutal we can't sanction it. Experience modern in its most dangerous form. You know, they said it couldn't be done, but they say a lot of things. You know, it's
And
like,
also,
I love it.
In recent years, culture has become more obsessed with UFC.
Right.
And not obsessed, but more interested in, at least. And certainly this sort of copies the old, it definitely harkens back to the old boxing posters, which I love.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the reason why, just one more thing, I think another reason why this seemed to take off the way that it did is I think people forget that it's not uncommon to have emotional attachments to cards. And, you know, one of the complaints I hear, you know, when people talk about ban lists and banning too capriciously is that not only do people lose money on cards, but these are cards they love playing. And, you know, to give people an opportunity to play these cards, you know, even though the deck may not be great, you know, I understand that Dread Return or Dredge may not be swell in Modern, but to give me the opportunity to try it in Modern, or to try Hypergenesis just to like live that dream for a day,
Right.
you know, I completely get that. And I think that's why another reason why people were stoked is they're like, oh, I get to use this card again. And then I don't think that gets enough credit.
Sure, and that's a great feeling. And, you know, it's one of those like, well, now it's just the kind of languages in my trade binder rather, and now I get to kind of take it out and show it off, and you just get to enjoy it again, basically. And that's where a lot of the feedback that came when they banned Pod is people were just like, but I like Pod, and I enjoyed the feeling of playing that deck, and it was really cool in lines of play, and it was interesting, and I spent time getting it. Anyway, so we're gonna move on to the red zone, where we have the controversy that was just the bomb that was just that was dropped by Mark Rosewater, where Battle for Zendikar will not contain fetch lands, but will contain full art lands and a new cycle of rare lands. I'm opening it up here just so I can get this correct. It does have a cool rare cycle of dual lands, not just lands, dual lands. But they're brand new designs and not the Zendikar fetch lands. So the original Zendikar fetch lands went and their prices are absolutely ridiculous or whatever. I think it's great. I don't think he really needed to say that full art lands are coming back. I don't know why, if that was him trying to sort of like yin and yang, like, oh, it sucks you're not getting the fetch lands, but hey, you're going to get the full art lands, but we're not going to let you see them. But there's these other rare dual lands that we can also, so he's like trying to do this like the Oreo smash of like really cool and awful and really cool, and just if he can just keep the Oreo, you know, cookie pieces big and shiny enough and tasty enough, you won't taste the bad feeling inside. Feeling works both ways, by the way.
I like the middle part.
You should notice that.
Do you not?
What?
I like the middle part of the Oreo.
Right, but
I actually
And
don't
by
even
that I
eat
mean
the
I
cookie
like
part.
the fetch lands won't be in Zendikar.
right, of course. Why do you not want fetch lands in Zendikar?
Because I don't want 10 fetch lands in standard.
You don't want like
Why is that
shuffling.
Why is that so bad? I've
'Cause-
heard that mentioned before, but what's wrong with that?
It's
Shuffling.
so bad. Think about how ridiculous dig through time's going to be. Think about how ridiculous
Oh God,
Gurmag
Tassiger
will
and
be. You get to fill your graveyard and cast Gurmag Angler on turn 2 or Tassiger on turn 2. You get to do these weird things that you should never be able to do with Magic. And that's not a function only of the fetch lands, but it just so happens that it's something that would exist even if Delve wasn't a mechanic. being able to have perfect mana means that certain types of lands will never get played. If you put the fetch lands in, no one will play the enemy pain lands, and the prices will spike, and the prices of the pain lands will drop. And also they haven't really explored as much design space as they could if they simply go like, "Yep, we're just going to put these new fetch lands back in." So
I can see that.
While I think that Zendikar is going to be land themed, I'm happy that the lands themselves will not be in the draft and sealed environment, and also all 10 won't be together. So my theory that I posted on Twitter earlier was we had the fetch lands in cons, then the next block is Battle for Zendikar, and then the block after that, currently codenamed Fears, is going to have the next friendly fetch lands, or no, enemy fetch lands.
Enemy fetch lands, yep.
Friendly fetch lands. So I think that it's probably just going to be a little ways off, but you have to wait. Mm-hmm. And the new lands are going to be cool anyway. Hopefully they can compete on the same level as the fetch lands. Mm-hmm. Because, in Legacy, for example, the fetch land dual land mana base is all there is. There isn't a better mana base for anything. Partially because of Brainstorm, partially because of the mana fixing,
right.
Partially because of things like Deathrite Shaman. But I think that in standard, fetch lands aren't exactly perfect, but in the older formats, of course, they are. Mm-hmm. But if you have all 10 fetch lands, it's perfect mana bases for everyone, even for 3-color decks.
Yeah, I mean, that argument that you just gave me, Ruben, that's probably the best defense I've heard. Like, there again, people have been outraged about this. Like, my feed, I got back from my doctor's appointment at 2 p.m. today, and people had just started their outrage. And if I look at my Twitter feed now, people are still outraged. Like, this is a really polarizing topic. And, up until you explained it this way, I didn't really see the big deal. It's interesting how these cards, have such a passionate response. Like, people really love their fetch lands. And I think this is something people have been clamoring for a while. I am really interested to see what this new cycle is going to be because, I look back at what's been done before and it's like we've had the pain lands, we've had the fetch lands, we've had the filter lands, we've had, what else? I mean,
Scry.
Scry, and I'm kind of curious, like, how can they top that or how can they compete with that? And it'll be interesting to see.
There's all of the types of lands that we had in Future Sight that we haven't seen yet, for example, like Nimbus Mazes.
Okay.
We've also seen the filter lands like Graven Cairns. There is more room to explore. How about a whole River of Tears cycle?
Like Grove of the Burnwillows, you're thinking?
Or Grove of the Burnwillows.
Okay.
Grove of the Burnwillows. A blue-black Grove of the Burnwillows is probably too good.
It's probably insane.
But a River of Tears is perfectly reasonable.
Sure.
I think. Probably a whole cycle of Horizon Canopies is too good. But there's a lot of design space, and that's all only things they've printed already. Who knows what they thought up in the meantime? Yeah, so I have full confidence in Wizards of the Coast to be able to figure out a new way to do dual lands.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not too concerned about that, but I for one am happy, and I know I'm in the very minor minority here, but this is the red zone. And so I'm ready to fight you. This is my argument and why there shouldn't be fetch lands in this.
You're going to have everybody after you, Ruben. You've got the Detroitians coming for you. You've got the fetch land apologists. Man.
The Detroitians, if you will.
Detroitians?
Detroitians and fetch land apologists.
For those who don't recall, because I looked it up myself, the River of Tears cycle was really interesting, or the River of Tears potential cycle. River of Tears was a rare land in Future Sight that tapped for a blue mana, but if you played a land this turn, it taps for black instead.
Right.
And to have that entire cycle, I think would be perfectly fine. I think would be really interesting. You have fetch lands in Standard right now, which would make it even more interesting, so you'd be able to turn on the color the way you want, but then cons would filter out, and then you wouldn't have that ability anymore, which would also make it...
you have them in tiers. Again, see, you would have the fetch lands in tiers.
Right?
It would always be in Standard with fetch lands.
For the river, see?
Yeah, see
I don't like, no, financial aside, it sucks that certain lands cost $1 bajillion. Like, that just sucks. I mean, there's no really way about it. Wizards does the best they can to pay attention to the secondary market. Be glad we're not Yu-Gi-Oh! And that your cards are worth money and they don't reprint fetch lands a year later as commons, okay? Yeah. Because that happens in those other games and it makes you hate yourself. So Wizards doesn't do that. Be thankful that this collectible card game remains collectible. But they do, try to kind of like, that they try to like lower the pressure a little bit and say like, okay, we're going to reprint some stuff in Modern Masters. We're going to reprint some stuff in this. We're going to reprint Thoughtseize in Theros. And because a lot of people thought that Thoughtseize would come back in Modern Masters 2013, or it was coming back in like a core set or something, and it never did show up, and people were like, oh my god, Thoughtseize cost $1 million, and it got expensive, and then they reprinted it and it went down a little bit, but it's still an expensive, powerful Magic card, and it can still be worth money, but they don't have to just throw it into a common slot or whatever, just so everyone makes sure that everyone has their copy or whatever guaranteed. So that aside, I think there's a shuffling problem if everyone has perfect mana bases and they're shuffling, and the other half is the delve issue. Like they made delve, and this is the best way to get cards in your graveyard is to just play lands with your deck, and that's just
I'm having
delve.
flashbacks of Legacy with turn 2 dig through times, and
Can do
Did
it.
I hear you right when you mentioned the rules text for River of Tears, that River of Tears basically has landfall?
Basically, yeah.
Interesting. Weird.
Isn't that interesting? I saw what you did there.
Yeah.
I love River of Tears. I remember playing that card. That card was sweet. Like, there was no fetch lands back then. It was just like, this card is sweet, and I can turn it on and use it how I want. It was really nice.
You got black mana on your turn and blue mana on your opponent's turn. Great.
It was really, really good. I had a good time with it. So that's a thing, and I mean, it's really interesting. Again, I kind of wish he hadn't busted the full art lands. I really don't see a reason why he did that.
There were people out there who actually wanted to know the answer to this. I know we're not that kind of people. We're not that kind of...
We're not that kind of purple?
We're not those kinds of purples. And there were people who were curious. We're going back to Zendikar. What's going to be the same? What's going to be different? And everybody, that was another thing that was universally loved by Magic players, was full art lands.
Yes.
We're going back to Zendikar. Is this thing that's universally loved going to come back? And the answer is yes. And I like that the answer was yes, and not you'll see.
Well,
personally,
it's good to have surprises, right? Like, this is the type of thing where you could have just hung 5 full art lands from the ceiling or whatever during the PAX party and just been like, oh, don't these look sweet? And they're full art lands. He doesn't have to say that they exist and that they're cool. We know they exist and that they're cool. And if someone has that suspense and they don't have that answer, sometimes it's good to have that. So, that's a thing and a stuff. But either way, that is what we have for this week. We are going to turn the corner into our final segment, which we call The Finisher. So for The Finisher this week, we had Pro Tour Vancouver take place over the weekend, where we saw the so-called Vancouver mulligan was introduced, where you got to scry 1 if you mulligan.
Hold on 1 second, Evan. I think that the stream went down.
Did the stream go down? Checking. It says I have viewers and everything.
I see viewers, but I don't see the stream.
I'm live, and I see us right now.
Okay.
So we're gonna move back. So the Vancouver mulligan happened. After you mulligan, you got to scry 1. A lot of people said it was a good thing. I think it was Ari Lax who said he didn't like it because it helps. Like you saw, the mono red decks did so well. He thinks I believe he thinks that's part of why they did so well. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but as I recall, that's what he was kind of getting at. Regardless. What next gameplay change will Wizards introduce to improve the player experience? Aaron, you want to kick us off?
I would love to kick this off. Okay, so at Worlds in Nice, Wizards of the Coast will disallow the use of mountains, so those goddamn Scandinavians will stop winning Pro Tours with Lightning Strike.
Tell us how you really feel. Tell us how you really feel.
Officially.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Martin Bang
My
and Joel Larson
breasts ache with rage.
Gosh.
Furious.
Ruben, what do you think?
Well, I'm not nearly so aggressive. Except for when I'm playing mountains myself. But Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar in Milwaukee, by the way, will introduce Mana Screw Insurance, where players purchase insurance from one of the many dealer booths in the area ahead of each round to guarantee that they hit their 3rd land drop or their money back.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, for me, effective immediately to prevent excess shuffling, as we just spoke about, all Grand Prix and Pro Tour level events will be played using the Magic Online client. Yep. Let's see you complain about shuffling now. See you wait all that time.
Shuffler.
The
Out of the
shuffling.
frying pan and into the fire.
That's correct. So, ladies and gentlemen, that ends another episode of Magic Mics. Thank you guys very much for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell, Ruben Bressler. You guys are fantastic. As we go into our final slide, So, we hope that you like, tweet, favorite, share, do all the socially things that tell people we exist and that you like our work. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmikescast, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.